Okay. Uh, Nothing major to report right now. From my perspective, we'll be at IT Nation next week.
Hmm.
So if folks are going to be there, please stop by, say hi. That's always nice. We love seeing partners at the events that we're at. Um, Andrew, did you see the article that I sent you on the Solar Winds CISO?
I'm sorry I didn't. Talk to us about that. I can bring it up if you'd like.
Well, I was curious to know if anyone else saw it. Chip and I were going back and forth on it a little bit, but I think it's got the potential to change the cybersecurity landscape, which is going to be important for all of you and your customers, specifically the C-suite.
Yeah, and Jim, just to follow on, I sent you another article today about the state of New York and changes
Mhm.
that they've made. So we should incorporate that into this discussion.
Yeah, I haven't even seen that one yet, but for those that don't know, the Solar Winds CISO is being brought up on charges.
Criminal charges.
Yeah, based on essentially lack of or what they're considering fraud in that Solar Winds breach
Wow.
attack from a couple of years ago.
So the
Um,
claim in detail, guys, is that SolarWinds internally recognized and documented through internal email communications that they had vulnerabilities in their product that needed to be remediated, but weren't getting the attention quickly enough to get remediated. And it were those vulnerabilities that were used to that were exploited in the Sunburst SolarWinds supply chain attack. So
So when they say not quickly enough, what was the actual time frame?
I think, I mean, I don't remember specifically looking back into the article, but I think it was in the, in the over a year kind of time
Oh,
frame.
okay. So
that
we're not talking like 30 to 45 days, like a relatively narrow window here.
No, that there's indications that they were concerned, or at least talking about some of the problems in the product line. Many months, up to a year prior to the attack. And the fraud part comes in because the SEC requires public companies to disclose this kind of information in their reporting, in their quarterly reports, and they didn't. You guys have all read, well-crafted political doublespeak, and you sort of talk around issues and obfuscate them, and that's the conclusion that the SEC has arrived at, and what they're pressing on is that this was an intentional act of fraud on the part of SolarWinds CISO. Personally, I think that's going to be a stretch, but we'll see how it plays out.
yeah.
Well, if anything, they're going to obviously go for the extreme. To me, it sounds like maybe gross negligent, like intentional fraud. Maybe they can get them on misrepresentation, but that suggests that there was intent to defraud and not just bury the facts.
Yeah, I think they're shooting for the moon, and they'll probably end up with the stars.
Yeah, yeah.
But they are the reason I'm bringing it up is because I think it has an opportunity to change the landscape. And I don't, to your point, Gary, I don't think that the CISO was intentionally trying to, you know, be disingenuous or even, commit fraud.
Mhm.
What I do think is that he was like just probably too cavalier and lax about their cybersecurity stance. And obviously, it's coming back to bite him. Now, how does that relate back to everything that we do? We are, if we're doing our jobs right, we're constantly in front of our customers and their executives talking about their risk and showing them where their risk is. And they now should be concerned, even though most of your customers are obviously private entities. But let's just say one of their customers, ends up getting breached based on their negligence, right? There's a cascading effect that can happen here. And, I think it's just just another example of kind of a landmark opportunity that should be changing the way people think about cybersecurity posture.
Yeah.
Jim,
And to double down on this, I sent Jim an article earlier today that the state of New York has expanded beyond the federal guidelines in terms of what their required reporting is for breaches and specifically for ransomware payments, that they're requiring those to be disclosed as well. I find this Solar Winds thing really fascinating in the context of, at least for me, as kind of a lifelong security professional. And I think for you guys, I'm curious as your reaction to this. If you become aware as an MSP of a particular set of vulnerabilities, either in your practices or your customers' practices, you're not going to announce that to the world. Like, that's the last thing you're going to do. You're going to do what you can to fix it as quickly as possible. And yet these public companies are in this catch-22 situation where as soon as they know, they're expected to announce in quarterly filings that they have vulnerabilities that have to be addressed because they want the investing public to know beforehand that there's a risk out there. But to me, that's counterintuitive. It almost defeats the purpose. Like, do we expect that Microsoft is going to announce to us every vulnerability in their own code that they found? I think we've learned pretty clearly over time that they definitely do not do that. They know about things for sometimes years before they get addressed. And then all of a sudden a bounty hunter will pop up with it and it becomes a thing. And then it gets fixed very quickly, or they have an attack like they did recently. So to me, there are really, really competing goals here. One is acknowledging that there are problems that need to be addressed. The other is keeping the knowledge of that secret so you have time to address them before people that otherwise wouldn't exploit them can. So I don't know. I'm really interested in what the community thinks about all this.
Yeah.
I think that,
go ahead, Leron, then Andy.
yeah, just one quick note. The interesting thing for me on this is going to be the legal precedents that are set. So as this thing is going to play out in court, who's going to be responsible and what are going to be the things that the court finds they should have done, because that could very well set the standard and set the pace for these large public companies. And that's probably going to trickle down on many of us.
Exactly. So Andy Rowe, who I got to see last week at the True Peer meetings.
Well, I'm grateful for you calling on me. Hey, a couple of things that come up for me on this and for the New York article that was in the Wall Street Journal today, that we as MSPs and facilitators of, in this case, cloud security services, we have to really kind of have a log of all the things that we're doing and affecting policy, and having that communication with the customers to say, by the way, these are the legal ramifications that are occurring today, and this is how we feel that you may or may not be addressed. This is both a sales and marketing opportunity, but also a internal compliance thing that we need to communicate with our customers. And how could we do this better with SaaS Alerts?
First, 100%, Andy, and this is one of the reasons why, right? Like, I've been an advocate of our MSP partners, and a lot of them have, essentially with a coverage extension notification, going out to your customers and saying, look, we're going to implement this solution, and if you don't want it, you need to sign this waiver to opt out. That is the ultimate cover your ass and cover your SaaS situation and scenario, where you let them know what the risk was and they declined, right? Because I can't even tell you, as a former MSP, there was tons of times when we presented a project to a customer. Their infrastructure was 4 years old, and we went in and said, hey, you got to do this way. No, it's we'll just keep pushing it, and they did, and then the whole thing went, and they end up blaming us because they didn't actually do what we told them to do when we told them to do it. So
I'm thinking about this case and how this will be used potentially against an MSP, who isn't communicating and having a log or a trail of this communication with their customers if they experience a difficulty.
100%, Andy. That's exactly where I was going with it. Like I used to tell my team all the time, after we got burned by that a couple times, I'm like, you know what? Make sure all of this stuff is in writing, because we used to do the quarterly business reviews and go in and talk about project, and things they should be doing. And once they said, no, 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 you never told us that, and we didn't have proof that we did tell them that, I said, everyone has to make a log. This has to be in writing. We need to go be able to go back and show these people exactly what we told them when we told them. And it's cybersecurity and these conversations you're having with your folks, your customers, exactly the same thing.
Jim, I think it gives MSPs, we were talking about the conversation with customer. I think to me, where I tie this together in conversations with customers is about their responsibility in taking responsibility for their cybersecurity, right? Not just something that is, hey, we warned you about, I'm not saying what you said a moment ago, Jim. Hey, we warned you about this. You didn't do anything about it. No question, those things need to be documented. But I think for us as MSPs to get the, $250, $350 a seat and really change our role in this with our customers, we have to show them that we are helping them as a consultant change how they view cybersecurity and technology within their company. It's no longer something we outsource this to you. That was fine 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But today, you can't outsource risk, right? And using this article to say, as the executives of your company, you can't abdicate that I handle your cybersecurity. You have to own, right, how you manage risk as precedent shown here. This is where we are headed. And I think the last thing I would say, Jim, is, and everybody is, turn it around and say, how would you feel or react if one of your major customers or suppliers who had information about you was attacked, and because of their lack of competence in their security program and how they took it, was potentially game ending for you, or took you offline and caused you millions of dollars of damages? Would you seek kind of some restitution from that company?
Yes.
Right? I gotta believe you would.
And think about the reputational damage around this getting out and having to deal with it.
Well, yeah, and I think that this one, Chip, obviously they're looking, we know the number of publicly traded companies, governments, and institutions that were using Orion. There's a reason this one is going to be made a spectacle.
Yeah, absolutely. It's because of the government agency involvement, no question.
Yeah,
at least it feels that way to me. But talk about a double standard. Look at the Microsoft hack that just happened. Do you expect the SEC to be rolling out against Microsoft next year over that?
Because of Storm?
No.
You mean the storm?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, of course. Of course not.
So, but I think these are important topics for all of us to be aware of, to inform our customers about, because it does flow downhill. This flows downhill to small businesses that serve public companies that are part of their supply chain. Because at some point, your customers are going to get asked to fill out vendor analysis forms, vendor review forms, that sort of thing. And you guys are going to get sucked into that. I would bet there are people on this call that's happened to them already. Like their customer comes to them and said, hey, we're a supplier to this company and we have to provide a vendor analysis review of our information technology. You got to help us do it. Like it doesn't stop at the top of the pyramid.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I forget the company on this call. it happened several months ago. There was somebody that had marketing. They had two large customers that were in the marketing industry that never would take their security requirements seriously until their largest customer provided their customer an audit. I should say audit, Jim. I'm sorry, Chip. They provided a questionnaire that says, if you want to keep doing business with us, you need to tell us about how you handle our data, privacy, right? Incident response, notification, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So just quick show of hands, maybe a yes or no, a Y for yes and for no. Have you guys started to experience those types of questionnaires coming your way from potential first or second, third parties that you might work with or indirectly work with? Andy, you have. I can't believe you're the only MSP on this call that has gotten a questionnaire.
Yeah, there's no way that's the case.
Yeah, lots of them. Yeah, and what's worse is one of our largest customers, a large law firm, came to us recently and said, we're getting more of these questionnaires about security and vulnerability testing and all this stuff. And, so I talked to him about what that would look like. And basically the answer was, no, we don't want to spend any money. We want to do the bare minimum to be able to literally check the box so I can answer the question. It's like the motivating factor is a major problem for people. They understand the risk, but the partners are more concerned about what car they drive than protecting their firm.
Exactly.
It's interesting, Gary. It'd be a really good use case to say, to walk them through a mini tabletop there, to walk them through a scenario. Like, what kind of law firm was it? Just curious.
I'm actually not sure what they. I know they do general corporate law. I'm not sure if they specialize in any particular area.
Interesting. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what kind of data they have. Like, okay, you do general corporate law. When you handle a case, tell me what kind of data that you get exposed to, you handle from your customers, right? Do you guys ever do any mergers or acquisitions? Do you do any types of,
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah.
Because that's really because that's the way you're going to tie dollars to it.
No, it's a good point. But unfortunately, the people, I'm talking to office administrators who are great, but she knows the mentality of the senior partners, and they're the ones who hold those purse strings.
Yeah, got to get to the big guys or
Yep.
gal. This is kind of where I was going with that, Chip. Interestingly, with that article that you and Jim brought to the table, the Orion one, this is really this was a good article. I'm not saying I like would verbatim use it, but this is what you as MSPs have to start sitting down with your customers, talking to them about, that they have an obligation to take part in their cybersecurity strategy. This is no longer again, you handle it for me, Gary. This is, you have direct responsibility for managing risk within your organization.
Yep.
You will be held accountable, to not only the risk and the financial, but also the reputational damages that come with it. All right, Michelle, did you want to just talk briefly about, and then I know Leron's got a few things, talk about what's going on in your world.
Sure.
A few things there.
Yeah. We have a great webinar coming up on November 14th, where we will go through some of the, not me, but Jim, Chip, and Leron will go through some of the updates that we've made since Fortify was launched with August. So we've made quite a few thanks to you guys on the call, so you should definitely be there and check it out. Do you guys, Jim, do you have anything you want to expand on that, or anything I missed? No. Okay. So that'll be 1 o'clock on the 14th. And then this week Ben and Anthony had their first ever office hours, which was a lot of fun. I know some of you guys were there. And if you missed it, I'm going to share the recording with you now. And it was a lot of fun. And check it out. I have to give Anthony kudos for wearing a helmet the entire call. So you'll definitely have to check that out.
Wearing a helmet?
It was Halloween, so it was costumes optional, and he opted for the costume.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so see, check it out. And if you do, oh yes, and Ben had digital sunglasses, which was, I don't want to say it was half-assing it, but it was kind of half-assing it. No, it was a great call. Definitely check it out. I am also going to add the link to office hours if you want to add that to your calendar. And that's all from marketing this week.
Hey, Michelle, how many participants did we have in the office hours? Do you know?
Oh, it was like 46. I mean, we were pushing 50.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's
it was
great.
really well attended. Yeah.
That's
I'll
great.
be
Well
having
done,
one of my
guys.
techs attend starting next week.
Andy.
I just
And
wanted
you-
to say it was great in content, and I encourage any partner to sit in on these things. And the linkage of office hours with the Reddit sub posts are going to be great ways to collaborate and build greater awareness of how to better use SaaS alerts.
Thanks, Sandy.
Stuff. All right, Leron, you have a few things.
I do. Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah.
So big picture stuff. You guys know that we're working on Fortify templates. We're working on App Wizard in the background. We've also gone ahead and taken RBAC out of beta, which sadly means that we've had to remove the Rickroll video. We also have some new events, Microsoft Risky Activities events, which we expect to hit either this week or next week. And then I'm looking at a list of 8 new Fortify recommended actions that are brought to us by CIS, including ensuring that Microsoft Azure management is limited to admin roles, ensuring the customer lockbox feature is enabled, ensuring that users installing Outlook add-ins is not allowed, ensuring external access is restricted in the Teams admin center, mailbox auditing is on for all users, MDO safe attachment policies, ensure all forms of mail forwarding are blocked, and modern authentication for Exchange Online is enabled. So be on the lookout for all of these actions either today or tomorrow.
Very good. Very good. Any Q&A for the product team, whether it has to do with Fortify or any of the most recent things? Did any of you do anything yet with CIS? And Leron, can you see, have people started adopting it from your side of the equation?
I haven't looked, although I probably should look.
Yeah, no, you got a lot going on. But anybody have questions for the product team?
So I've got one thing to add, Andrew, from coming from our operations side and our support team. We've had a few incidents, and when I say a few, I mean I think literally 3 since the release of Fortify, where partners have implemented Fortify policies sort of system-wide across their entire breadth of customer organizations, and it's led to some unexpected consequences in the sense that the customer didn't know that the behavior of their product was going to change. In other words, this is the age-old battle between accessibility and security, right? Customers want to do everything the easiest way possible. All of a sudden, you implement a policy that requires a change in behavior, and the customer blows up. So, I want to just, I don't think this group on this call needs the following cautionary statement, but I also feel it's important to make it just in the sense that people talk outside of this call. And that is, Fortify is going to make changes. I know you guys all know this, but really drive home the point, that are sometimes draconian in the views of the end user. If you go and enact a new policy, it's going to lock that tenant down. And if it's not communicated to customers quickly, it can lead to some disharmony on the customer side. We've seen a little bit of blowback to us in the sense that, oh my God, well, how do I undo this? And the simple thing is you just remove the policy, you just back it off. There's the easy button in Fortify to revoke the implementation of that policy. We just want to remind everybody to really think it through, like, what's this going to do to our customer?
Questions, by the way, for Chip, Liron, or product team? Jim, I sense we need a lot of caffeine on this call.
Yeah, exactly. It's that time of year. Clocks are about to change. Yeah.
The sugar high is worn off.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Gary, I mean, the candy just the other day, where is it all? From Halloween. Okay, so Chad, it's like someone's complaining. Okay.
Yeah, it's funny. That's a good one by Chad.
That is a good one, Chad. Would you rather that or the building burn?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right, so I got one today, Jim and Chip, that I kind of want to talk through with you, and I hope, again, the folks out there chime in as well. This is not meant to be a FUD tactic, so let me just be clear, but I do want to bring up Microsoft is dubbing this a new threat actor. It's a derivative of Black Hat, which was the threat actor from actually, let me share out my entire desktop, which, as you guys know, for me is quite dangerous, but I'm going to do it anyway. But I have part PowerPoint to share with you guys and part actual article. So there's this threat actor that's recently been identified that goes by, Microsoft is dubbing them as Octotempest. They've also been called Scattered Spider and UNC 3944. Just a quick high level. What makes this group, in not only reading these articles, but talking to John Strand just as of yesterday, is he's like, you have all threat actors, use similar tactic. We talk about TTPs, right? He said, in the run-ins with these guys, it's like dealing with the pros versus the amateurs. He said, it's not the fact that they're doing things dramatically different. It's just how good they are. And they are phenomenal at a few things that we need as MSPs to be very aware of. And I'll come back to this, but let me kind of get your attention. Number one, they love using RMM tools. Number two, they have resorted, one of their primary social engineering tactics is calling help desk. So think about, have you, as an MSP, trained your help desk in terms of how to handle and determine whether a threat actor was on the line or not? Have you put in, for example, various authentication mechanisms that would have stopped the MGM from happening, right? So just as we start to get into this, think about the fact that they are targeting help desks. That's not their only thing, right? Their the main way they are doing things is buying credentials and live session tokens, Chip, one of our favorites. But what they do from there, it can be a little bit eye-opening. Let me give you a preview of, and I'll come back to this. I'm gonna pop this open. Can you guys see this? As I'm gonna expand this, but I'm showing you that this is the part where I'm not looking to scare you. I am looking to educate everybody, because this is something I don't think any of us have ever thought about. How the hell do I educate my employees and potentially my customers when a threat actor is now resorting to physical harm? So this organization targets IT people, high net worth people. So let me just pause there for a minute. Chip, what are your thoughts on that? In terms of, you know, it was eye-opening for me because I never thought about talking to an MSP of what do you do if your life's threatened, right?
Wow.
You know, how do you handle that as an employee? What do you do if a customer calls you up, a co-managed customer, and says, hey, we haven't dealt with this before, but a few of our help desk people just got their lives threatened.
Yeah, this is pretty serious next level stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to admit, Andrew, I hadn't, I'm not read into this particular group yet. So I'm glad that you're bringing it. And this is all in the US, correct?
They are, well, yes, this is happening in the US. It's obviously a foreign entity that is phenomenal at English, by the way.
Well, or ChatGPT is cleaning it up for them. I mean, we've talked a lot about that the large language model, learning model has made it easier for non-English speakers to get very effective with what they're doing, unfortunately.
True. No, but their actual conversations.
Yeah.
On the phone.
So these are SMS messages between the attacker and a support team member, presumably at a public company or at least a high value target, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So the first question I have is, do the slides in your deck discuss how the person reacted to this and or discuss how they should, or is that going to be part of what we're going to go through today? Because
they didn't. That's a great question or point, Chip. They didn't say this is how they dealt with it and how and the outcome. It was more so to say, and again, what John Strand was saying is, not only are these guys phenomenal at what they do on the keyboard, but they're at a whole different level of aggressiveness in terms of, like, they don't even most of the time, they're not even using encryption. They're straight out stealing data and using threats.
Yeah. So my first reaction to this, like if I start thinking about this rationally, is, okay, so they got my phone number. And by the way, I'm sure we all get spam texts at a certain amount of level, unless you've been incredibly good at masquerading your phone number. Looking at this, if I'm on the other end of this, I'm at first going to be pretty darn concerned, obviously, but I'm also going to be thinking to myself, hold on a second. If these guys, have to resort, they've got my phone number somehow, and they have to resort to demanding a password from me, they're not very good hackers. Like, this is sort of the lowest level tactic, right, in terms of trying to steal someone's account. So, I would immediately be saying to myself, my bullshit meter would be going off pretty hard with respect to this. Now, would I be calling law enforcement if I were the tech on the other end of this? You can bet I would. Absolutely. Would I be calling my help desk, my internal help desk? And I don't know if you guys all have that. We have that at SaaS Alerts. And I'd be saying, guys, I've got a threat to my life and my wife's life if I don't give over a password. I'm just telling you right now, in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to hand over my password to these guys so they don't come and shoot up my house. And go ahead and change it right away. Like, I'm going to comply with their demands, but I'm telling you I'm doing it so that you can block access. Like, if that's how I would handle it, like, without even thinking through it, those are the things the steps I would take, And
what's interesting about this, that this is a technique that I don't think a lot of people have thought about, Chip, is their tactics. They're very good at SIM swapping. And that's probably where, when you're like, well, these guys are low level, they're actually incredibly high level. They've actually gotten very adept and good at this tactic, which again is something quote unquote newer that, and then we'll talk about in a minute, some of the tactics they have that aren't in most security teams' playbooks, right? In other words, if people have, gotta have security teams, and again, we're talking to our contingency, or MSPs here that typically don't have security teams, but it's more so to take into account of not only are some of their tactics not in the playbook of security teams, but have we even considered how to handle these? And again, I hope you guys understand this isn't meant to be throwing FUD at you, but it's just another thing that we like, how do we handle this if it does happen?
Well, it's another case to be made for YubiKey. In this situation, right? Like I could give him. I don't have a password. I got YubiKey. If you want to come get it from me, fine. Come
I
get it
wouldn't
from
tell
me.
them that. I would just give them the password and not worry about it because you have YubiKey.
Yeah,
Here's
Jim,
the password. Go ahead, knock yourself out.
it's so funny you say that, Jim, because phishing resistant MFA was one of the top. I don't know if it's this article or this one, but you nailed, by the way. Oh, as I look, but take a look, folks. Again, these guys are very adept. Like RMM is, one of their go-to methodologies, and even the fact of like, this is interesting, using a VPN, VPN replace the Twin Gates, a ZTNA solution. So, I mean, they are using a combination of stolen credentials and living off the land as their go-to mechanisms. But Jim, I'll see if I can find it real quick here. But yeah, phishing resistant MFA was, you nailed it, Jim, was exactly one of the mitigating steps that I'm kicking myself here because that must be the other. I've had several articles up here on this.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it just makes sense, right? Like,
yeah, it absolutely does. So this is what I kind of wanted to walk through with you all. Chip, Jim, you've made some comments. Any comments out there from MSPs? Ben, you kind of newer at SaaS Alerts, but certainly spent many years in the MSP fold as we kind of maybe walk our way to the MSPs on the call. Any thoughts from you on on how you might handle something like this?
I was posting a couple of articles, and like I see this all the time on like the scams Reddit of like physical threats, and I don't know if it's the same people doing that, but they're typically toothless and are just trying to scare people.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this has been carried out, obviously, someone actually showing up, but it's interesting where things are heading, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we've historically seen in most corporate, whether it's business email compromise or some type of security event where lives are being formed, right? It's typically we've got data, we're demanding a ransom, right? So a little bit of a different tactic.
I think it's like Jim said, if we're all passwordless, we can't give out what we don't know.
Any comments from the folks out there listening in? No. But yeah, you can see here, Jim and Chip and folks, they're the way in which, they're using, their social engineering. And the reason I wanted to show you in this article was that so much of this is near and dear to us, right? Stolen credentials, getting people through social engineering. And again, what do you have as an MSP in place from maybe a whitelisting perspective if some type of RMM utility, and are you educating your customers on these types of, hey, our help desk, right? This is the part I really want to hit home, and I'd love to hear from you guys. Our help desk, Mr. Customer or Mrs. Customer, will never ask you to do these types of things, right? So thoughts would you, on how you might educate customers, do a webinar, do lunch and learn, whatever? What kind of policy you want to kind of enforce at your customers? How might you go about handling this? Because this could be just literally as the step, right, Jim, of making sure we have good policy management with our customers, and going all the way back to our initial conversation here with Solar Winds, that we've got to act at a very different level with our customers, and we're not just a technology provider.
Exactly. Anybody
have any thoughts on this? Have you, as an MSP, have you started to think about these things at all, and educating your customers of what you will and wouldn't do with their employees?
Yeah, it's actually interesting. So like there are services out there that help you to validate who a client is by giving them like a PIN or something like that. But it's actually interesting that the reverse isn't true, where if they're getting a call from someone who says they're from my company, how do they know it's us?
Correct.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And obviously you can't go by caller ID because that's so easy to spoof.
And Gary, this is exactly right. This is the MGM Grand. Fair? This is, by the way, this is the number, if I've said this before, again, forgive me, folks. The good pen testing organizations, right? Can I have a pen test? Again, what's the scope? Oftentimes the scope in, a good pen test will encompass some type of social engineering. If you talk to John Strand, James Carroll, or any of the good pen testing companies, especially in the healthcare area, Andy, their hit rate's almost 100% getting a doctor to hand over credentials.
That's scary.
Mm-hmm.
That's really scary.
So Andy, so Gary, I love your point that, we think about, there's these technologies out there to authenticate the customer as the customer. But what are we doing to educate the customers that this is how we call you? And it's actually us.
Yeah, I can't tell you whether I like it or not. I can't tell you how many times we're resetting passwords, we're exchanging passwords so we can log in as them and do whatever it is that we're doing. And people are very willing to hand over the keys to the kingdom. Now, most of these people know my texts by name or by voice. But yeah, it's a very interesting dilemma.
But Gary,
how do I prove it?
Hey, I recently got hired by I could easily, through social engineering, right, on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just recently got hired by Gary. They're an awesome company. I love being here in Rhode Island. I just moved in. He mentioned I should work with you on this issue. Right, I'm off to the races.
Yeah.
Andrew, I'd love to actually call out Adam Robinson. He and I have been chatting in the meeting chat back and forth, because I think he's been dealing recently, not with a SaaS Alerts directly related item or even necessarily SaaS security, but with a bank fraud situation that I'm very curious to hear from him how social engineering played into that, if he's willing to chime in.
Adam's awesome. I hope he's got the microphone. Adam, you got one?
Yeah, hi Andrew. Yeah, so I've got a microphone. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we got you.
Cool. So yeah, I mean it was a combination of crafted social engineering to trick the finance manager at a small to medium sized business into allowing them to connect to their desktop and talk them into transferring £25,000, which I guess is about $35,000, give or take. But it was quite clever actually what they did. So it was they called the business, the main telephone number of the business, asked to speak to the person in charge of finance, because they were calling from Barclays Bank, which is a UK bank. You may have heard of it in the US.
Sure.
the business actually do use Barclays, so I guess the perpetrator knew, may have known that already. They so they got through to the person, and they had an English accent. So quite often these callers are from India call centers. So that's usually a red flag. But this person had a really good English accent, so that kind of put them at ease slightly. They said they were from the bank, and they were looking at some potential fraudulent activity on their bank account, and they needed to act quickly to obviously avoid any loss of money. So immediately they were kind of confusing the person. They were making them panic a little bit. They were stressing the urgency of having to deal with this situation. So all of the things, I guess, that put people off their guard. And now at the same time, they must have got hold of one of the company management's credit card numbers, because they managed to submit a transaction against the credit card. This was flagged by the credit card company as a fraudulent transaction. So they sent a text message to this manager's mobile phone, which was a different person to the finance person. So they managed to do that. So the person who got the text message went to see the finance person and said, "I've just received this text message from our bank about a possible transaction on my credit card." So of course this person was on the phone to the bank already. So they said, well, they thought they were, and they said, "Oh, we've just had this through." And the person said, yeah, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about these transactions that are going against your bank and your credit card. So it seemed like it was a fairly legitimate call. Obviously, this person, had knowledge of the company, they had knowledge of the bank, and they had knowledge of this potential fraudulent transaction. So that gave them a bit of confidence, unfortunately. So the perpetrator asked them then to go to a particular website to try and deal with the issue. The website was actually blocked by their web filtering. So the person then got them to go to anydesk.com, which obviously was allowed, and told them to download the AnyDesk portable client, which I guess many of you will know that the AnyDesk portable client does not actually install itself. It just runs as a process within the user's session. So if it had been the full AnyDesk installer, of course, it would have got blocked by their normal security software. But because it was a portable version, it wasn't blocked, and it was able to run. So the scammer obviously was able to see the person's screen. So he said, "Can you log into your bank portal, so we can check these transactions and try and block them?" So of course they did. They logged in, and they asked them to do various things. They asked them to look at the most recent transactions. They asked them to filter transactions by sort code. They got them to do quite a lot of stuff. So again, probably playing on them, trying to confuse them, trying to distract them as well, but probably gathering some information. So the next thing they did was to ask if a particular supplier was somebody that they dealt with, which they named this supplier, and this finance person said, "Oh yes, we do deal with them." So they said, "Well, there's an issue with that particular supplier and a suspicious transaction. So let me just take over and show you what I'm talking about." So very quickly, this person obviously took control of the session and was able to actually process a transfer of this £25,000 in a matter of seconds. So quick that the person, the finance person, was just kind of watching in shock, really, and didn't really understand what was going on. So at this point in time, when they saw that the transaction actually occurred, is when they got a bit suspicious, and the lady said, "I don't understand what's going on here, and I'm a bit concerned this might be there might be something funny going on. So I'm going to hang up the call and I'm going to call the bank back, directly, which they did. And then they pulled the network cable out of the desktop, which obviously killed the AnyDesk connection. And it's probably lucky they did that, because otherwise I think the scammer would have attempted to transfer more funds out of the account. So this has happened now. So they call the bank and ask to be, speak, they explain what's happened and ask to speak to somebody in the fraud department. They're put on hold. Now, whilst this happens, the scammer, or presumably it's the same person anyway, rings a supplier who this 25 grand has been transferred to. He rings them and gets through to somebody, obviously senior or in the finance department or whatever, and says something like, oh, we've just had a transaction of £25,000 transferred to you by in error, and we need you to transfer that money back, immediately. And he manages to talk them into transferring that money, obviously not back to the original bank account, but onto another bank account, because obviously the supplier doesn't know which bank account it came from. They can just see that the 25 grand has appeared in their bank account. So they transfer it onto another account, which may be offshore, or who knows where that is. But he even tricks them into transferring more money out of their account, which I find quite bizarre. But obviously I've not spoken to them. I don't know what the details were, but this is what they've relayed back to, to the business I was helping. So all in this time, this finance lady is still on hold with the bank. She hasn't managed to get through to anybody yet. And it took 40 minutes for her to actually get through to somebody that would help at the bank, which was quite ridiculous, really, when you think about it. All in all, she was on the phone to the bank for 2.5 hours. They managed to lock down the account. They cancelled all the cards. And luckily, I say luckily, only £25,000 was transferred out. Now, I don't know what it's like in the US now, but in the UK, the banks have pretty much said for quite a while now that if you let somebody give access to your account and you let them transfer money, then it's on you. We have no liability whatsoever for that. So pretty much, the bank are not going to help them reclaim this money. Obviously, the money has been transferred out of the supplier's account into another account, so their bank's not going to help them either. So pretty much they're assuming this money is lost, and they might have to go down the insurance route to reclaim that money, which is may or may not be successful. But the takeaway here is, I think obviously user education is key. This person realized after the event, but they should never probably assume that if somebody calls them out of the blue that it is actually their bank. The advice I always give is hang up and ring your bank directly with the number that is the correct number. And secondly, they knew not to give somebody access to their PC. And they said that even when they went to this initial website that they were told to go to, and it was blocked, but that was suspicious, but they just carried on. They should have known at that point. And they said afterwards that, of course, they realize now what an error that was. So there's some user training there, I guess, to try and help people. But you can only help people so much at the end of the day. And I guess it's what can we put in place to stop things like AnyDesk Portable being used as a temporary tool. As I say, it wasn't installed, so tools like ThreatLocker wouldn't have prevented it from happening necessarily, but maybe it would, I don't know. But there's a lot that can be done to stop these things from happening, but unfortunately it's a human error that led to it, really.
Really great story. And what's interesting, if you kind of deconstruct it, so much of what this threat actor used, we were just talking about, right, Adam? I mean, if you think about it, and Chip, love you to chime in. We started with social engineering, and the fact that they knew their bank, and the fact that they knew who one of their suppliers was, I mean, that tells you right away they were in their mailbox, right?
No, I don't know if they're in the mailbox actually. I mean, certainly we've done a review of their 365 tenant. There is no evidence of a compromise at all. Might be the supplier's email was compromised.
Or right.
Obviously, I don't have visibility of that. What is interesting though is that they had the enough information about the credit card to be able to submit a fraudulent transaction, either shortly before the phone call or at the same time as the phone call. So where did they get those details from is a good question.
What makes you certain if they had credentials or bought a session token that was live?
You mean into the email, you mean?
Hmm?
You mean into the email or?
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, certainly I've done I've done an audit on their, as I say, their 365 tenant. There is no evidence of compromise. There seems to be more social engineering in terms of they've managed to harvest the credit card details. So that might be through a fraudulent, online retailer, or it may be from a physical, restaurant or something like that. They've managed to get those details from, who knows? Because what they've done is they've triggered the bank to send a text message to the person's mobile phone. So the bank have said, yes, we saw a fraudulent transaction on the credit card. So we sent a text message to the phone to say, this might be fraudulent. You need to check it. So that happened. That definitely happened. So the scammer did have the credit card details. They also had the phone number of the business. They knew who to speak to. So they'd done their they'd done their research. May have come from the supplier rather than the actual business themselves, but that's a difficult one to figure out at this moment.
Yeah, it's also what's interesting, Adam. It's also, again, depends how far back you go, because the way in which some of these, it could even be before, you were their managed service provider. The exfiltration of data, these large data sets, right, that live in the dark web, etc. So, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying, again, there's various ways that these things can happen where, just from a time perspective, you wouldn't have seen it even, looking at the near-term audit log.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a lot of places we can look. I think, it's some, I know somebody posted about cyber insurance. So this business didn't have cyber insurance. Interestingly, the official statistics for the UK is that less than 4% of businesses have cyber insurance in the United Kingdom.
Wow.
So they are pursuing their general business insurance, which does have, most general business insurance in the UK anyway has some coverage for money fraud. So it's not necessarily a cyber insurance claim. It's just
that
a
attack
general.
have been considered cyber claim anyway? Because this was a social engineering. This wasn't, ransomware or something of that regard.
Correct. Yeah, it's not a traditional cyber insurance or classic cyber attack. It's a social engineering subterfuge attack, isn't it? So.
But that, I mean, look at where the play that I think, in wrapping things up, look at what the playbook is, where the playbook is headed, and where the playbook is, right? We're not saying ransomware doesn't happen. We know it does from the threat briefs, but social credentials and or social engineering without even ransomware, right? Why go ransomware, right, when you can do it this way?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, if you've got the cojones to actually talk to people on the phone, and you can sound credible, then it's probably a lot easier than hacking into a system and running ransomware.
Yeah, the stats certainly show it, right, Adam? I mean, the threat briefs.
This is a great story, by the way. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, it was awesome, Adam. Thank you. I know we're at the top of the hour. So Jim, Chip, anything to wrap us up with?
Chip had to jump.
Had to jump, okay.
I didn't see Jim either, so he may also have had to jump.
All right. Well, awesome. Adam, thank you so much for sharing that, by the way.
You're welcome.
Well, keep safe, everybody. Give some credence and thought to how you might interact with your customers, and make it an awesome week. We'll look forward to seeing you next Thursday.
Andrew, are you in Florida next week? Or are you here?
Yeah, I'll be there. You'll be at I think you registered for the event, so I'll see you.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, of course. Duh. All right. See you next week.
All right. See you guys.
Bye.